On February 5th, Angera Keith and her 15 students were at the Austin Public Library's Carver branch holding class for the KUT Community School. It's a school run by a Black advocacy organization called Black Sovereign Nation. Keith is the executive director. She says around 4 o'clock, she and another teacher were taking the students outside for track practice. They passed a group of Black teenage girls in the library and recognized one of the girls in particular.
And we've seen her in the library before. We don't really know her by name. We just know that she's one of the kids that comes over from Keeling every day.
One of Keith's 6-year-old students had to go to the bathroom, so they headed back into the building. That's when they saw one of the teenage girls again, outside. Keith's young student started shaking.
She's shocked that this little girl that we were just interacting with is now in handcuffs.
Keith said a male officer with Austin's police department was patting down 13-year-old Latasia Milligan.
This all happened because a rumor spread and the police were called by someone. The police came and detained Latasia off top.
According to the library staff, Milligan threatened to fight another girl at the library. That girl's mother called 311 and later 911. Milligan had an outstanding warrant. Keith says she was first told it was a library staff member who made that call, but she says the authorities should never have been called in the first place. Keith says after the incident, her organization reached out to library staff to talk about their policies. Right now, kids under the age of 10 have to be accompanied by a person 17 years or older at all public library facilities. But there are no procedures that directly address violations by minors between the ages of 10 and 17.
So no responsibility or accountability on the library's part, no concrete policy that can guide the staff members.
Now, Keith and other community advocates are demanding a review of Austin Public Library's policies on youth conduct and diversity training. Since the arrest at the Carver Library in February, members of the Black Sovereign Nation have had several meetings with library staff. At a meeting of the city's Library Commission in March, Angera Keith questioned Director Weeks.
Where is the statement from kids or community? Why is that not included? We're not getting a full picture, Director Weeks, when you give us. We're not.
Keith and other advocates have presented library policy recommendations, including diversity training for library staff and a policy to contact a parent or guardian of a minor. Christina Brown is also with Black Sovereign Nation. She says they've gotten almost 600 petition signatures in support of the recommendations. They've launched a campaign called No Sanctuary for Black Futures. Brown says until changes are made, they plan to deliver handwritten letters to city council offices and host citywide sit-ins.
We definitely acknowledge that these are spaces for oftentimes marginalized people to have internet access and obviously to read books and have access to information. And we are not against that, obviously. We just want those spaces to be safe.
And we have APL director here, Mr. Roosevelt Weeks. Thank you for being here. In a recent interview, you said that the city is always working to make these facilities safe, to be inclusive and accessible. And I'm wondering, a lot of activists are saying that there's a lot of hesitation on the part of the city, on the library staff. What are your feelings about that?
I don't think there's any hesitation. I think it's more of the process that it takes. A lot of things you just cannot change overnight. We've looked at our policies with multiple levels of folks, both inside of our library and outside of our library as well, to make sure that we can come up with the policies that's open and equitable to everybody.
And are you going to consider adopting some of the recommendations that Black Sovereign Nation has asked? They asked that there be a guardian or somebody to watch over the minors there. They asked that parents be called first instead of cops in case of conduct or emergencies. Have you considered any of that?
Now, one of the things that I want you to understand is that our staff is some of the best staffs in the city. They work hard, they know how to work with children, and they try to provide the best spaces for them while they're there. We are looking at several pieces of what they want to see. It's just going to take some time for us to work through some of the things that internally and also working with the community on what we need to do going forward with those policies.
So I want to just mention a couple of the policies and then kind of get your response going forward. So as it's written, a child under the age of 10 may not remain in the library unless accompanied by a responsible person who's at least 17 years of age. A person accompanying a child is responsible for the child and the child's behavior. Unless so accompanied, a child under the age of 10 may not enter, remain in, or be left unsupervised in the library. And if a library staff member determines that a child may not be safely turned away from the library or that the child is stranded, the staff member shall refer the child to the Austin Police Department. So can you sort of fill us in on what exactly is the criteria for a staff person to call the police, especially in the case of a minor? Because it seems like in this description there's a determination there, and what goes into making that determination?
And I can, if the child is left alone and that we can't reach the parent, and we're about to close, that's the only time we'll call APD to come out, because they need to be protected while we are closed, and a staff member will stay with that child until either APD or the parent will come by to get them. And just so you know that we've never called APD on a child and a child has gotten arrested. The only time that we do that is that if the child is in danger or another person is in danger, those are the only time that we will call APD on a child.
So there's not a behavioral component or indicator that would cause staff to call APD on a child?
Only if it's meet those criteria. And that is if a child is threatening someone or they're being threatened or there's an imminent danger to that individual. That's the only time. Just for a child being a child, we would not call APD out for situations like that.
Okay. So you recently mentioned that Austin Public Library is expanding its youth services, and particularly curious about that age 10 to 17, sort of that in-between time. Is this a particular age group that Austin Public Library has special consideration for, is considering programs for, since I'm imagining that this population, you're just seeing more and more and more of them?
We are, and primarily for the simple reason is that a lot of our parents kids who come to the library, they're not able to be there with their child. Most of those parents are working 2 and 3 jobs, and that is a safe place for them when they get out of school. We're seeing quite a few kids that come to our school coming to our libraries, especially around those where schools are located. And when those kids get out of school, they have nowhere else to go. And so the place that their parents tell them to do is go to the library. And they stay into the library, and oftentimes when those kids get out of school, learning is not one of the things that's on their minds. They want to make sure that they can have fun, and then they can just be free to do whatever they need to do. And so with that, we put in programs at some of those locations where we have a lot of children that's unaccompanied between that 10 and 17 age, is to make sure they have things to do that's constructive, where they're having fun and that they're learning. And a lot of times, we're providing snacks for those kids, because a lot of these kids, they don't have lunch until, they don't have anything to eat until after, they have lunch at 10 and 11 o'clock, depending on the size of the school. And so when they come to us, they're hungry and they're energetic, and so we try to provide those things for them.
Yeah, and in the city's most recent equity assessment of the library, some of the recommendations that they made was for the library system to collect more racial data, for more inclusive hiring, eliminating youth fines. Whenever you're looking at these recommendations, I know that you've only been in this position for about 2 or 3 years now.
A year and a half.
2.5, sorry.
A year and a half. A year and a half.
A year now. Do you guys have a timeline at all as to when these policies will be updated and when this equity assessment will be implemented into the city's policies?
We're working very hard on a lot of things and making sure that we are not only providing equal, but we're providing equitable services. And that could be a little tricky. Because a lot of times, the community asks for equal services. But for us to get to where we need to be to provide for those who are trying to get to a starting point, it takes a little effort. One of the things that we're trying to do is to hire more black and brown librarians. That's a hard task in itself, in that we only have 8 to 10 on our staff, African American librarians on our staff. And you got a city that's a population of 6% African Americans, and then asking or trying to recruit librarians to come to the city, it's very difficult because of the cost of living that's here. And so it's a challenge on one hand, but we're still committed to making sure that we can meet the goals that is set out by the equity officers for us, and then we're getting there. We're getting there.
Austin Library Director Roosevelt Weeks and KUT's Delia Jones, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
This is Morning Edition on KUT 90.5, Austin's NPR station. I'm Jennifer Staten with a special hour of Morning Edition from Central Public Library in downtown Austin.